They're all the same mould, I think. Well, it's in the mould.
Comrades, the weather is coming down. As we left Chesterfield, we marched past the Unemployed Workers' Centre. And what we were about to do is to hand over a cheque from the NUM to start off the fund which is going to establish the independence of that unemployed centre, the independence of that centre from Manpower Services Commission and indeed from the local authorities. Because we want the independence to carry out struggle and campaigns against the iniquity and the indignity of unemployment in our society. We want that freedom to struggle, and whilst ever we are funded by the state in any form, that freedom is limited. As Gordon arrived.
Haven't we? Said hello to earlier. You were say hello earlier? Don't know. Get my hand as well. Lovely. Nice to meet you. Brilliant. Bye-bye, Ramona. Bye-bye. I've read that. There. That's right. There we go. What's your name? That's right. You can let go now. That's right. You let go. Let go. Watch her, Z, she trouble.
She's a problem. What's your name? Hello, Callie. Please to meet you. That's
I want some.
You having a good time? Who are you with? All right, let's take you out. See you soon, Kelly.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Nana. Hello there.
Hello. What's your name? No, Nick. Just tell them. I can reach down there. Let go. Let go. Hello. Hello.
You only got to say hello to him.
Job. These lads feel the brunt of Thatcher's economic policies, and it is with great pleasure that we donate £500 from the miners. I understand that this is the first cheque, it's a new bank account, so let the miners be the first, and I hope other trade unions follow, and it gives me great pleasure to give this cheque to John. Thank you.
This is the biggest May Day held by the labour movement anywhere in the country. And at this May Day, I think we ought to make a basic statement about what the labour and socialist movement should be doing in Britain at this moment. And it must be to give full support outside as well as inside Parliament to all those who are now resisting the attacks being made by the government against the National Health Service, our schools, local government and trade unions, not least the P&O strikers in Dover, who are represented here today because they are facing probably the greatest challenge of all, namely the attempt by capital in this country to destroy trade unionism altogether. In the miners' strike, there was an attack upon the National Union of Mine Workers to defeat it. At Wapping, there was an attack upon the trade union movement in favour of a single union deal of people to work under the instructions of Rupert Murdoch. At GCHQ, the government banned trade unions at the demand of the Americans on the grounds of national security. But at Dover, they are trying to de-recognise trade unions, and we cannot allow that to happen. And we've got a representative here, Susan Haynes, who will be speaking in a moment, from Dover, a stewardess, a picket, and we are going to give her a very big welcome. Now, secondly, we have got to give to the people of this country a vision of a very different sort of future, which we are capable of building for ourselves. And if I make one personal reference, you'll understand why I make it. We've got some marvellous pioneers in the movement. We've got Jack Dash on the platform with us today, and we're going to listen to him. But may I make a reference to one other man who died this week, Fenner Brockway, nearly 100 years old. And Fenner Brockway gave hope to everybody in this country that it would be possible to build a better Britain and build a socialist Britain in a peaceful world. Now, what our people want is very simple and straightforward. People want useful work for all, good homes to live in, and with 100,000 homeless in Britain, 10,000 homeless in London, it is no surprise that Mother Teresa came from Bombay, because the conditions of the third world are now appearing in Mrs. Thatcher's Britain. People want good medical care, lifelong education, dignity for pensioners, democratic control over our lives, and respect for human rights and civil liberties. We will not accept execution without trial, as we have seen as a result of British occupation of Northern Ireland. Comrades, these are age-old dreams. They're the age-old dreams of working people. They are now threatened by market forces, and never let anyone persuade the labour movement that market forces can be left in charge of our lives, because if they are, we shall lose control over our lives. We are being threatened by the apparatus of the state, mobilized to defend profits and privilege at the expense of human need, and to crush anyone who speaks up for social justice. And having Arthur Scargill here is a reminder of the power the state is prepared to use to destroy those who believe that our mining industry should be put at the service of the community. And every year, hundreds of old-age pensioners die of hypothermia, when the miners who would be happy to dig the coal, and we should give it free to the pensioners, find their jobs are taken.
International Day of the Workers. It's very nice to see that we can celebrate May Day in this country openly and see so many thousands of people here. In Iran, our working class have not got the opportunity. People ask why this war is not ended after 9 years. It's been going on longer than the Second World War. But the reason is firstly the policy of the Khomeini's regimes. The policy because the war assists the regimes to divert attention from the social and economic crisis inside the country. But it would be wrong to assume that Khomeini's regime is the only source of the continuation of the war. Another source of the continuation of the war is the role of Western government, and in particular the United States in the Gulf. The US government maintains officially that it's neutral in the Iran-Iraq war. But we know the Iran Gate revelations, the Iran Gate scandal, what it said to us. For the 2 years between 1985 and 1986, the American government was supplying the barbaric Iranian regimes with armaments. And at the same time, they were asking their allies to embargo arms sales to Iran. But it also would be wrong to assume that Americans, the only country that are involved in the Iran-Iraq war. Britain is also involved in the supply of arms to barbaric Khomeini's regimes. Although the Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher and the foreign ministers on many occasions have said that they would not supply any arms to prolong the war, but the fact is that they have been supplying Khomeini's regimes with the spare parts for the Chieftain tanks. And last year, the government approved the sale of 6 static radars worth $343 million. And it was last year that ITN disclosed that 50 British firms were involved in supplying arms to Iran. Now it's very difficult to believe that such an activity, but such a great number of firms has not got the tacit support of the government. We believe that the British government knew these firms were supplying Iranian regimes with armaments. Currently, there is a big international cartel operating in the Persian Gulf. There are 13 countries involved in supply of arms to Iran. Countries such as Britain, France, Sweden, West Germany, Holland, Italy, Belgium, Switzerland, and many other countries. Therefore, comrades, we are confronted with a concerted efforts by the multinationals and the NATO countries to sustain this senseless war. And this is the structure of the arms industry in the United States and Europe. And it needs to export in order to survive. And that helps to sustain the domestic program, which is critical to the NATO countries. I would just like to quote from you, from one of the officials at Thomson CSF, a French arms manufacturer, who said, "We cannot allow ourselves to support embargo without jeopardizing the French armament industry. What if Iraq and Iran suddenly made peace? We would lose Tehran as a customer forever, and that is simply not possible." And comrade, this is the mentality that is prevailing among the arms dealers. And this is the mentality which is prevailing among the NATO countries. But it would be wrong to assume that the only source of tension is the Western government and NATO countries. Khomeini's regime itself is another source of tensions in the Persian Gulf. The cost of war has been tremendous. 1 million people have lost their lives as a result of this war. And some 3 million war refugees in Iran who are living in appalling conditions. We've got more than 30,000 prisoners of war, and some 350 billion economic damage have been occurred in the country. That is in a country whose 70 to 75% of its population live under poverty line. And the victims of war are mainly the young victims, children under the age of 18. And it was Khomeini himself that gave a religious decree that children over the age of 14 do not need the permission of their parents to go to the front. They can simply register and be sent to the war front and be massacred there.